how about instead of a Electric Boogaloo sequel version to the 9 philosophical phrases and what they mean from a year or two ago, we'll do just 2 phrases for now. What the second part is actually 2 other phrases thing, but we'll get to that later. Actually, we'll just say it right now. The first phrase is unconventional flexibility. The second phrase we'll get to in a second later, not later a second, is slime versus static. Let's start with the conventional flexibility. The way I described life over the years, and especially my own life story and the way I've gone about my own personal life, is indeed an unconventional flexibility. What does that mean? It is a way of going about the incongruencies of how unorderly my life has been, the chronology of how events have happened, how I've done things or not done things therein is explaining how just because there are certain things you can't do or should not do, or lose control over, or even have been forced to do and end up doing on accident, all those things, all that crap, all that shit, well, for YouTube's sake, shit. No need, but no need for fornication on the consent of the king. I mean, I didn't say that. There you go. But it's like the idea being that you have been able to see the power within you and to have some form of control that's not smartass or contrarian. There is something you can do in every situation, even in the midst, and indeed in the stead of everything else, to the chagrin of everything else that you can or cannot do. There are things that you can inherently do all the time. By that unconventional flexibility, just because there are things that you don't have or can't do doesn't mean you shouldn't focus on what you have or can do. So that's a bit of the old man and the sea philosophy for that matter. Not even a philosophy, it's a truth about life. But it's like a fact about life. Or a factual lesson. But whatever. Alternative life lessons, you name it. But that's particularly meant to be intended to be universal as a theme. Is that focusing on what you can do, not what you can't do. But as far as the literal, if quote unquote, terminology I'm using with that fake phrase, unconventional flexibility, is more the idea also that there's a style and aestheticism and customization that works with life that can be attractive, and in some cases even the ugliness can be part of it for a good reason. You see cartoons like The Grand Adventures of Billy and Mandy and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and there was actually this meme question about which one of these shows do you prefer, and some people would actually say Grim and Evil because of the fact that it was a funny kind of horror show. I think, however, the horror genre as a whole, not just in the set of creative, even sped-related kind of series and whatnot, compared to Foster's Home, but as far as that may not make sense, whatever. I mean, because Foster's Home was already its own thing. It didn't have to be about sped or creativity, or social life, but in friendships. The idea of Grim and Evil being that maybe horror doesn't have to only be funny as a combo genre, horror and comedy, like some of the other ones we know, like the Scream comedy series movies. So horror and comedy being combined, not just the old ages of only one genre at a time, or even the other theme of animation is a medium, not a genre. That's a little different for this video, but even considering cartoon series like Grim and Evil, where you know that the horror and comedy is supposed to be its own creative approach, I think there was an even deeper thing happening here, in my opinion, my own way of saying it. I will say this opinion, at least for myself. Especially towards the Underfist series finale. There's this idea I keep talking about, pandering to the aesthetic, and I described this in the very first Deep Dive episode of the season 1. Saying like that for a reason. Stay tuned. Where style and customization combines with the ugliness and edginess and uncertainties and unfairnesses of life in a way that combines all together, yes, your humble intentions, your normalcy living, and all the things with it. It becomes this one thing. You pander to those styles. You attempt to tamper with those styles, not because you're an innocent bystander who just messes with things corruptly or something like that, along those lines. You're customizing that style, that unconventional flexibility. You're able to do what you can with what is there, even if you don't have everything else in order or at all. Unconventional flexibility. Just because life can seem unfair, if it even is, different attitudes, different minds. Just because it can seem unfair doesn't mean it actually is, or whatever that means. There's always something you can do in the midst, amidst everything else you can't do, and there are certain ways to even make it seem flavorful and thriving, even in the midst of other unfair, forced, and taboos things. Going on to item number 2, the phase 2 or thing. Slime versus static. What is slime? What is static? What is both of these? The idea of slime is that, alike, again, akin to unconventional flexibility even, slime is the idea that we make progress towards things very slowly in different waves and stages. So, like, if you're trying to improve your, should make a personal example right away, but, not, at least not the other personal examples for private, but let's say you're learning how to speak sign language in Welsh, like me, for some procrastinated for whatever reason. Welsh and sign language, how specific, Ollie. So you're learning both these languages, the sign language, not Naruto, Welsh language, not the grapes, Concord, or even consular coordination, that's a little different show thing, cartoon. Anyways, slime being that if I were to approach this in even the most direct way possible, myself at least, or you, whoever's doing this, with their language thing, the idea would be that you would approach sign language directly, and then indirectly Welsh as a part of a maybe secondary minor language, as college Greek, whatever. You approach sign language at first as straightforward as possible. So you're literally studying sign language every day, whatever that means. You practice the actual language. You practice with people who are deaf. Not gonna say that rudely or even with an awkward intention. But you practice with deaf people. You practice with yourself. You practice it every day in an immersed environment. That's one of the best ways to learn a language, by the way, is immersion in a culture or whatever, in an environment. And then you have Welsh there. And it's like, well, what's the insightful way to approach Welsh without even doing it on purpose or even in reality that connects to this somehow, even if it's still irrelevant? Well, if you're learning sign language for starters, your brain is still connecting to your English language with the sign language. Because not just for the American sign language's sake, if that's not the only sign language, but your brain is still connecting sign language to your main language, even if that's not English. Yeah, I'm still speaking English in this video, but that's not the point. So sign language is connected to English, and those hemispheres are already forming in your brain. The pathways and the freaking neuroscience and psychology of this, well, mostly neuroscience anyways, is a little different. When you have main pathways in your brain, basically, you can form alternative mini pathways that go along those main pathways, and that's how you rewrite things like a freaking addiction, for that matter, and learn languages and all that, but good or bad, whatever that means, if even depictable. So you learn sign language, that connects to English, and that also indirectly, but still suspiciously, mysteriously connects to Welsh. And how the hell does that happen? Well, let me give you another example. We'll get to stack in a second other than slime. But like, let's just, or we need to give another example for slime before we get to stack. Let's just say you're learning, in another example, how to travel with your car. You're learning how to drive. You drive, for some random reason, you drive to the bank, then you drive to the restaurant, then you drive to the grocery store, and then you drive to the park. Why did you go to all those 4 locations? Why did you go to 4 random locations that still had an impact on someone else's life? Or some other things' lives, objects, locations, people, influences in life, that still impacted and changed their lives forever in an indirect, insignificant, trivial way, just for going to those 4 random places for no apparent reason. I wonder. So, yeah, slime. I mean, that sounds crazy and weird, but there you go. Static, as opposed to slime, and even as the chagrin akin, those big words, $5, to unconventional flexibility. Static is the idea that if you were not going to make straightforward and irrelevant progress over something, to those connections, static either means you full-blown, full throttle your way towards them 100%, 110%, 101%. You barrel down, measuring backpedal back into nothingness, which is kind of like a way of saying forbidden. Different, like forbidden, taboo thing, or even compared to that other chagrin to full throttle, or the other examples were said before. Or you measure in between. There is no stasis in real life. There's not even an actual way to perfectly balance anything. But the idea of static is that you polarize these things because you know that it's supposed to be simple. Full story, full blunt, then a story. Well, full story, full blunt, then a story. Said that again. Twice. Jacob Tutu mode. Static is giving a simplification without oversimplifying. It's the idea that if you have to do something right, at least do it the first time, or at least do it soon after. And the reason that this comes back into slime and unconventional flexibility is that it is seen as the shallow, prejudiced way to live life. Because some people have good intentions that they still overdo. They have the idea of being judicial and measured and balanced and having good judgment in a shallow way. So what they'll do is, I mentioned this in the last 9 philosophies explained video, honor curse. And this is a bonus for today, a rehash on that. The honor curse being that if you have good intentions, if your opposing team, especially your opposition rival, has good intentions dealing with you, especially if you did something wrong on accident or whatever, that's an example, not vague enough, and they deal with it properly, or they even mean to be good with you, and they mean to be kind and thoughtful with you and compassionate, and they still do it in a way that you don't prefer or think is still betraying you, that's an honor curse. It's not supposed to be seen that way, but it's one way to see it at least. The idea that you were betrayed on accident with someone's good intentions. And that can be really messed up, even compared to evil villains or criminals in real life, or even people who are just trolls, or, oh, don't feed the trolls the sage advice. Sorry, I'm dissing that, but I keep saying that over and over, even not even obvious. But point being that static is indeed a shallow way to live life. It's not a bad way to live life. It's probably the right way to live, actually. Not just a good choice, not just the best choice, but the right way to do it. It is my controversial philosophy, opposite opinion, and even having to be who I am while still negotiating certain things in other static ways, having to be full throttle this, taboo with this, balanced, not ever perfectly balanced, but still negotiating that either way, and even different scales of 25%, 75%, you name it. And then that makes it simple because I don't want to have to say 15.5% or 78.12%. Dude, no. I'm my own mathematician, not so much an irrational person or illogical, but I am a logical and rational person. I'm not saying that, but it's a little different. We'll go for one more minute, actually. We don't even have an end card. I won't be able to edit one anyways right away, but that is static. So slime versus static is the altogether philosophy of these two interesting words put in to describe this philosophically therein. That there is a way to do things differently. When you approach someone with good intentions, as per honor curse maybe, when you have good intentions to help someone and you still overcomplicate their life, versus when they're too shallow to know the difference from a different perspective, so you might as well not help them. But they're still going to screw you over either way sometimes in situations. You can avoid them or not, or respect their boundaries and privacy, and I said in the last video, you can respect them enough to not overcomplicate their lives, even if you were going to help them in a creative, brilliant way. Those are the people you may not be in their energy anyways. What I'm saying is that slime versus static is the idea that there are levels of life you can go to in slime progress waves, whereas static is the overkill, oversimplification that can still be something for a good reason. Unconventional flexibility and slime versus static, everyone. Take care. Those are two philosophies and what they mean.